The former First Minister of Scotland, Alex Salmond, once led the country in an independence referendum. Under the leadership of Nicola Sturgeon, his protégé, there's a new bid for Scotland to break away from the UK. But she faces pressure from her former boss, who is demanding more action on the plans. Earlier, I spoke to Mr Salmond about his role in Scottish politics since leaving office and the controversy around him. Mr Salmond, thanks for joining us on the show today. I'm actually, as you know, I'm in Brussels, you're in London. I'm here because I was talking to Maros Sefcovic today about some of the consequences of the UK leaving the European Union, a union it's been in for nearly 50 years. This week, your successor, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, launched plans for that second independence referendum. What did you think of her proposals?
Well, I mean, apart from the comparison with other countries, which is a perfectly fair thing to do because it's right and proper to make the point that other small European countries are doing much better than the UK is doing economically. There wasn't really much proposals beyond that, but of course we're promised a series of papers to come. I suppose, like many people in the national movement, I'm just pleased that the starting gun has eventually been fired because we've been waiting on it for some considerable time.
And do you think she's the right person to lead this campaign, and would you share a platform with her?
Well, yes, to the second part of your question. In terms of being the right person, she's the inevitable person to lead the campaign. She's the head of the Scottish Government. The Scottish Government have a prime role in the independence referendum. I don't think they should have the only role, incidentally. I think it's really, really important there are voices from out with government who are proclaiming independence.
I asked you partly because obviously there's kind of quite a lot of personal animosity between the two of you at the moment, or is that now being cleared up?
Well, I mean, whatever personal difference between myself and Nicola, I mean, they are insignificant compared to the national cause of Scotland becoming independent, to which I and Nicola Sturgeon have devoted our lives. So I don't think you would find any personal difficulties coming in the way of something which is much bigger and much greater than any two individuals.
I just want to ask you about what you think Brexit has done to this possible solution for Scotland. Nicola Sturgeon has made it clear she still wants to join the European Union and the single market. That's what you once wanted, I think. But Brexit's changed your mind, is that right?
Well, I've changed my mind in the sense that I think it would be a better option for Scotland, at least initially, but perhaps in the long term, to be in the European Free Trade Association, the four-member association. I mean, there are many advantages of that, but I think the prime advantage is, while it takes perhaps 5 years to join the European Union, whereas EFTA, well, it takes about 3 months to join, having the security of EFTA membership strikes me as a very good idea indeed. Then you can decide over the longer term whether the people of Scotland want to go in to the European Union.
Brexit, you would acknowledge, has complicated the picture a bit for Scotland. Would you agree with that? I mean, Nicola Sturgeon got into quite a lot of hot water or difficulties in that press conference when people repeatedly asking her about what we're seeing now in Northern Ireland and the read across for Scotland, and is there going to be a hard border between Scotland and England? That's a massive problem, isn't it? I mean, Scots might want to be independent. They might not want a hard border.
Beth, you've said complication, difficulties and hard border in the same question. I mean, I think part of the difficulties Nicola had at the press conference was they haven't published their proposals on Europe yet. If we're taking the Northern Irish example, what the border of Northern Ireland has meant with their total access to the single market has been prosperity for Northern Ireland in relative terms, at least for the first time in recorded economic statistics. Northern Ireland is top of the table in terms of the nations and regions of the United Kingdom. In this interview, we're not solving the problems of Northern Ireland, but we're merely looking at the Northern Irish example to see what it tells us about Scotland. And what it tells us, and nobody would describe, nobody serious person, but perhaps the unionist press in Scotland might describe the administrative border in the Irish Sea as a hard border.
Do you accept, though, that there would be checks on goods between England and Scotland, or you think there's a way to avoid that? Because
well, there certainly wouldn't be checks at the border. I mean, the maximum you'd have, certainly on an EFTA proposal, an
Checks on
effort
goods
before.
moving between the two countries.
Yeah, a point of source and point of origin. Yes, that's one of the consequences. Now there are advantages of that. The primary advantage would be that you'd have full access to a single market of 500 million people. So there are pros and cons, swings and roundabouts. All I'm pointing out to you is not around in economic terms. If we leave to one side the politics,
Yes.
the pros have been much greater than the cons.
How likely do you think there will be a referendum before the next general election then?
Well, I take the Scottish Government at its word. It's a no ifs, no buts commitment now that there's going to be a referendum by October of next year. So the national movement in Scotland are looking forward to taking part in that referendum.
You could see a scenario where Holyrood legislate for a referendum, but they don't hold a referendum. Could you see that as a possibility?
I see many scenarios, but the first thing to do is to ask for it, to let Boris Johnson deny it, to let him deny the will of the Scottish Parliament, and then take effective political action to change his mind. As I say, my view is that Boris Johnson is not a strong political figure. I think, it's an open question as if he'll even be Prime Minister by the autumn. And therefore, this seems to me a very good time to exert political and democratic pressure.
You were taken to court in 2020 on a series of sexual assault charges. You were acquitted of all of those charges. And at the time, some of your allies suggested you'd been a victim of a witch hunt within the Scottish National Party. You then went on with allegations that there was a conspiracy against you designed to cause your downfall and even imprisonment. That was unproven. We had the Holyrood inquiry and the investigation by James Hamilton. Both strongly criticised Nicola Sturgeon, but they didn't say there was an organised conspiracy. It was a torrid time. Have you come to terms with all of that, put it behind you? Is that saga now over?
Well, it certainly is not going to get in the way of an independence campaign. There's a police investigation ongoing into illegal leaks of material from the Scottish Government. There's also a Crown investigation or a Crown review of possible perjury at the High Court trial. And these things must be allowed to take their course. They're in the hands of the police and the Crown Office. And obviously I've given evidence to both of these because I would like to see them come to a conclusion.
Has it politically damaged you? And the reason I ask is that Nicola Sturgeon said, from her own conversations with you, and I'm going to quote her, she said his behaviour was inappropriate, and she said she'd searched your testimony for signs of reflection and recognition of your behaviour, but there was not a single word to acknowledge that. Do you acknowledge that your behaviour towards women at times was inappropriate?
I'm not going to go over what was well gone over, well-trod material, Beth. That's in the hands of a police investigation, in the hands of the Crown Office. And nothing I'm going to say is going to interfere in these ongoing... No, this is really important, Beth. There's a police investigation into criminal leaks from within the Scottish Government. There's a Crown Office investigation into possible perjury at the trial. I am not going to say anything that cuts across these investigations. Clearly, they're not investigations into me, but other people are entitled to the same natural justice as I am, and therefore I'm not going to follow you down this road. What I will follow you down is answering any questions you wish on the independence campaign, which I'm delighted to participate in.
I need to ask you this in light of what's happening in Ukraine. You only gave up your Russia Today show in February. You started doing it in 2017. That was after years of reprimands towards the channel from Ofcom, high-profile resignations from employees, sick of being made to give out the Kremlin line. Yet you took that job. Why? And now, in light of what's happened subsequently, do you regret that? Do you think, again, that has politically tarnished you?
Well, Beth, in terms of reprimands by Ofcom, Sky Television has many, many more than RT managed, incidentally. That's just a fact. Until at least the last 17 in a day, which was done in March. In terms of my programme, I had total editorial independence, and nobody, I think, would ever suggest that programme was anything other than fair and balanced and gave everybody a chance to speak and put forward their point of view. And there was no interference in that programme. Even, for example, when I interviewed Peter Tatchell about his experience in campaigning for gay rights during the World Cup, nobody said boo to it from RT. obviously, I suspended the programme and then made that permanent on the Russian invasion of Ukraine because I thought it was impossible to conduct a current affairs programme in a wartime environment. But in terms of my experience with RT as a broadcaster, I had no complaints or difficulties. In terms of Russia's foreign policy, I'm afraid my thoughts on that are that illegal invasions of other countries never work. But then, of course, my consistency in opposing illegal invasions is rather better than other politicians. I mean, I've opposed illegal invasions of countries regardless of who was doing the invading. Very few people can say that.
You're famously a betting man. What are the odds of an independent Scotland in your lifetime?
Oh, heavy odds on. I mean, the Royal Ascot's on today, even without Her Majesty the Queen, unfortunately. But Royal Ascot's on today. I think if independence in my lifetime was a runner, it would be heavy odds on in the Gold Cup.
OK, Alex Salmond, thanks so much for talking to me. I appreciate your time.
Not at all, Beth.
Thank you.
Anytime.